guys, it's Kirsty. Today's video is about my experience with taking medication to help me with my OCD. But before I get into that, I would like to ask, please do subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button below in order to stay up to date with new videos as they're released. So it's a bit of a debate, I suppose, meds or no meds when it comes to recovery from OCD or, in fact, anxiety. One thing that we do know is that you need to be, working on some kind of, there needs to be cognitive work going on there. Exposures, changing your irrational beliefs, starting to challenge your beliefs about things to bring down the fear level, bring down the anxiety level, working on tolerating uncertainty. But the thing that there is no right or wrong answer about is the topic of medication. Do I take it? Do I not take it? And, if I take it, what's the right one for me, etc. So I won't go into detail about the type of medication that I have taken, but I will say that for me, medication has helped me. So I'll go back to my first experience of taking medication for my mental health. It was within about, I think, maybe 6 to 9 months after my mum had passed away. I was 25 or 26 at the time. And I started taking medication to help me with my mood. Just because I was starting to feel quite just loss of enthusiasm for things. And it's just, obviously, at the time it was, it was grief related at the time, but grief can affect your mental health. So I took that medication, and I was on it, I think, for about 3 years. And I think that actually it was helping to keep my anxiety reasonably under control. And I do wonder if this is part of the reason why perhaps I didn't, my OCD didn't get really, really bad when I was in my 20s. I don't know. Anyway, so I was taking that medication for about 3 years, and I was happily taking it, not really thinking much about it, just really thinking, well, I feel fine as I am right now. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I was, doctors kept on mentioning to me about, trying to come off it. And I didn't feel wholly comfortable. But after a while, I felt like I couldn't justify being on it, I suppose. So I started, with the support of my doctor, I started to taper down. And that was okay. I was quite paranoid, I think, am I going to get really low mood, or will I feel depressed or anything? But a friend reminded me, people who don't have mental health problems still feel down some days. And if you do, that's normal. So I kind of thought, okay, that's a really helpful thing. Had never thought of that. So a couple of years later, my anxiety got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And again, I'm not attributing this to coming off the medication. I think it's the anxiety for me had been there anyway, sort of lurking in the background for many years, from when I was about 18, possibly even before anyway. But I think that this is where the OCD started kicking in more and more, sort of ruminations. And then I started a new stressful job as well. Anyway, so a couple of years, I think just under 2 years off medication, that was when my OCD became very, very bad. I had been getting worse and worse with health obsessions. I didn't know that it was OCD at the time, but then my obsessions started to focus on my relationship, and I had no idea what that was. So I could previously attribute the health kind of obsessions to health anxiety, but I'd never really heard of relationship anxiety or OCD or anything. So in this period, I was unable to work. The thoughts were 24/7. I wasn't getting any sleep, because every time I started to fall asleep, I would jolt awake and sort of wake up like panting, basically, in panic. My nerves were just frayed. The thing that I was possibly struggling most with was just not being able to eat anything. So aside from having no appetite, I had really bad diarrhea, and on occasions when I tried to eat, it made me sick. Just like the act of just swallowing my food, I vomited it back up again straight away. So I was feeling quite weak at this point as well, with the lack of sleep. So I did visit my doctor, and the doctor gave me some medication to try just to help take the edge off that physical anxiety. And by this point, I was not having any treatment. I was I'd started to wait for NHS treatment. And I was looking into other options, private options, which I was lucky that I was in a position that I could do that with help at the time from my dad, bless him. I would always be grateful for that. But I was still struggling to eat. I couldn't hold a conversation. I wasn't sleeping. I would maybe get a couple of hours. I was taking sleeping tablets as well, temporarily. Of course, my doctor didn't allow this to go on for very long. They never do. If they're responsible, they'll keep an eye on these things, because of course sleeping pills can become addictive. But that I was trying that, and I started on a low dose of my medication, and at first I almost feel like I felt a bit worse for the first few days, like I wanted to crawl out of my skin. I was just on complete and utter high alert. But then again, was it also maybe because I wasn't working and I was stuck with my thoughts all the time? I don't know. Anyway, I was expecting this anyway. I'd done a hell of a lot of research, a compulsive researcher here, about whatever I can get my hands on. And so I stuck with it. And after about a week, I was lucky that I noticed a huge it helped me a lot, basically. My level of kind of being on absolute high alert had come down. I was still physically anxious. I was still locked on 24/7 to my theme and various other themes that were cropping up. I was starting to suspect by this point it was OCD, but continuously doubting as you do. So yeah, they helped. My appetite started to come back. I remember the first time after a couple of weeks, I actually enjoyed my dinner. I think I had spaghetti bolognese, and it was like, oh my god, I enjoyed it. And then I remember laughing for the first time for a couple of weeks. I mean, I'm somebody who I think people would describe me as having a decent sense of humour. I am somebody who can laugh my way through a lot of things, to be honest. I think humour is it's the medicine for many things, but I felt like I lost my laugh. And I think even though I was locked on 24/7, I noticed that with being able to enjoy my food again, I was able to laugh again from time to time as well. Even though I was suffering from inner turmoil, I could still laugh. So medication I do believe it kind of gave me it relieved some of my physical symptoms enough to be able to eat and sleep okay-ish. And after 3 weeks off work, I was alongside taking medication, and I started to increase my medication more at this point as well. And I was swimming once a day, doing a little bit of yoga, and I was practicing mindfulness as well while I was waiting to start treatment. And then after 3 weeks, I did return back to work, and it's with how full on my job was. It was not easy, but I think it was the right thing to do for me because the structure was really, really important. So I really do feel like medication helped me with that. But the problem is with me is that I was so desperate at this point to get rid of the thoughts that I kept on asking if I could increase my medication with the hope that it would stop thoughts, but it didn't. It helped me with, as I say, some of the physical symptoms, going to the toilet, my upset stomach. I think I'd had, because of my upset stomach and changes in appetite, I'd also suffered from quite a lot of diarrhea as well, kind of irritable bowel kind of symptoms as well. But the medication, no matter how high I went up to, I couldn't get rid of the thoughts. And so anyway, I had to accept at a certain level that was as far as I could go there, and I needed to work more on the cognitive side. once I started to seek OCD specific treatments, I started to see real shifts in the locked on feeling 24/7. So I started to, with the guidance of my doctor, taper down my medication just a little bit. So I'd started off on of this particular 150 mils, and then I went up to 100, and then I went up to 125. Now, I think in hindsight, 125 was too much for a person of my size, but I was very desperate. It made absolutely no difference going down to 100. And then I gradually, over quite a reasonable period of time, tapered down to 50. And this is where I sat comfortably for a couple of years, and it's only been more recently as a challenge, because I've been quite stable in my recovery for a while, still having some spikes and some niggles from time to time. There's still some irrational beliefs that I need to get under, so I will from time to time have kind of a free floating anxiety feeling, just where I feel just kind of a little bit of anxiety for not a reason that I can put my finger on easily. And I will still have intrusive thoughts and get a little bit locked from time to time, but not too often. So it felt like a good challenge to me to, again, with sort of checking in with my doctor, taper down just a little bit more anyway, just as a challenge to me, I suppose, as an exposure, because I am somebody who has from time to time had kind of fear, like fear of going backwards. And I know that fear was there because I felt a bit anxious as I started to do this. And I think it was the fear of, what if I go back to where I was? Which is something I've spoken about in videos and preached about. And, so again, there's still work. And this is, again, it's an example of how we do have to maintain and keep working our recovery, and we don't want to be getting complacent, which is why I thought, it'd be a good challenge to, see how I get on with reducing my meds again. But at the moment, I'm still taking them because I feel like I know how much they helped me initially. So I may come off eventually completely, but I'm okay with the fact that I'm taking them, because luckily for me, it didn't interact with me too negatively with, bad side effects or anything. I'd say maybe a small side effect initially when I was on a certain level, maybe a slightly reduced sex drive, but not too bad. And that was on that level, on the high level of them. So I'm quite lucky in that regard that this one worked okay for me. And it did really help me. And in my opinion, there's no shame in taking medication as an extra thing that can help you get back on your feet while you're going for your treatment and you're bringing anxiety along for the ride. You could still exposures, they're still effective even if you're taking medication. It might be that as you work through your recovery, you choose to lower the doses and see how you get on, and that's an exposure in itself. But I was working on my recovery and made good progress while taking medication. And it's interesting to see how I do without it, but I'm not in a rush to see how I do without it 100%, to be honest, because there was periods where I was looking at other people coming off their medication, beating myself up over the fact that I was still taking it, when actually, one of the things that is really not good for us in our recovery is comparing ourselves to other people, because all of our bodies and minds are different from each other. Different things help different, people, different approaches. So it was not helpful to me to look at other people and beat myself up because I was still taking medication. They weren't, because this is my journey, mine alone. And that's how, what worked for me. And I think it's very important to, look at your own journey and what works for you. And if that's not meds, then fine, brilliant. If it is meds, fine, brilliant. Whatever, works for you. But I am somebody, Rob did a video about, this about stigma of medication, and even people who are anti-stigma might still have stigma. And I'd say, I wasn't happy about going back on medication when I started going back on them, because it had taken me a while to taper off my previous medication that I'd been taking. but I was kind of desperate at the time, and I'm really glad that I did that, and I took charge in that way, and I took them. For me, in my own personal circumstances, the stressful job that I was in, it was good for me, and I was always proactive working on my recovery, because I suppose, having had the experience of losing my mum when I was in my mid-20s, I was very much of a life is too short mentality. So I very much did want to kind of take it, you know, stand up and take it on, and it kind of, you know, I wanted to do what I needed to do to help myself, basically. And you know, if there's any good things you can take from losing somebody, and there's no good things really, but apart from the fact that it gave me that attitude when it came to my OCD recovery. But I'm happy that I made the choice to take the medication at the time, because in order to get myself back up to, you know, feeling like I could take it all on and live my life day to day, it gave me that extra bit of a kind of starting point physically, I'd say, particularly when it came to the my appetite and sleeping. Those were the two things particularly it really helped with. And that's not to say that I don't still, like every other person, have bad night's sleep. I do have bad night's sleep sometimes, like everybody does. People who don't have mental health difficulties have bad night's sleep. I'm not saying that, but I was able to get sleep without being on, like, having my nerves absolutely frayed, sort of waking up constantly, because that's how I was. So I hope this video has been helpful to hear somebody's perspective on medication and their experience with taking medication. And, you know, don't beat yourself up if you're still on medication, other people aren't. That's really not helpful, because it's your journey. And there really is no shame in being on medication. For, you know, when you're completely recovered, doesn't mean you can't be taking medication still. One doesn't, you know, just because you're taking medication doesn't mean you're not recovered. So it's what works for you individually. So as I say, I hope it's been helpful, and thank you very much for watching. Take care. Bye.